Hey, I'm Angela. Welcome to the House of Aiken. Today I'm going to be sharing with you how I save time in the kitchen. Now, I'm a mom of 3 and I homeschool, and my husband works from home, so we're all home a lot. And basically we eat all our meals here. So we have to be really efficient in the kitchen to make sure we get everything done, all the meals happen on time, everybody has what they need. So I'm gonna be sharing how I get it all done. My first tip, and by the way, these are all kind of unique to me, what I have found work the best, and I'm gonna save a couple of them at the end that I have never heard anyone else share before. So you're gonna wanna make sure you stick around for that. But the first thing I'm going to share is to make big batches. So batching out food really helps you not be constantly like, oh, what am I gonna make? Now, meal planning's good, but that's not what I'm talking about. This is where, you make big batches of things that you can eat on all week. If you're like me and don't do a lot of processed foods, batching food is such a time saver. So things that we batch are things like granola. We can do like frozen beans where you get the dried beans, go ahead and pre-cook them, and then you can just stick them in freezer bags, put them in the freezer, and they're ready to go. Because beans take, like an hour and a half to 2 hours to cook. So that's something that can save you a lot of time if you're getting those dry. So another thing I like to batch is bread. I like to make my bread from scratch. We do a sourdough. It's a spelt flour, so it's kind of specialty. I can't find it at the store anyway. And that's something we eat just a lot of. So I definitely like to make that. I make that pretty regularly. I make 2 loaves at a time. I'm thinking I'm gonna have to up it to 4 loaves at a time because we've got 2 teenagers in the house. And if you have a teenage boy, you know how much they can eat. So we're definitely going through the food around here and just really need to have bigger batches just to keep enough on hand. The next thing I do that has to do with those things I make in batches is I memorize my recipes. So my staple things that I make a lot of, I just go ahead and memorize them. And if you've done it enough, you've probably got it memorized too. So it's not that hard, if you're doing the same thing regularly, you just get used to what you're doing and you don't even have to look at the recipe anymore. But if it's something new to you and maybe you haven't memorized it yet, I would suggest going ahead and just taking some time to memorize that recipe if you know you're going to be using it a lot. And it just makes it so much faster to not have to wake up your phone when your hands are messy or get out your recipe card or whatever and just get all your ingredients out that you already have memorized and you're just ready to roll. So that really saves a ton of time not having to look at a recipe when you're cooking. The next thing I do is I make sure I have a clean kitchen before I start cooking anything. So before every meal, I make sure everything, if there's anything left out like that's been drying or whatever that I just left to drain, I put that away. I just start with a clean slate every time I either start cooking a dish or a meal or whatever. And that way you don't have the visual clutter. Everything's back where it belongs. You don't have to like, oh, did I leave that in the sink? Like, where is that knife? Everything's back where it belongs, and it's just a lot faster and easier to think and be able to find what you need. I also like to clean as I go. So if I'm making like bread or if I'm making granola, as soon as I'm done using the bowl, like stirring everything, mixing everything in, as soon as I get that thing in the oven or on the stove or whatever, I go ahead and clean up all the dishes I've used to make that dish. So basically, like while something's baking, I go ahead and wash the dishes, I wash the spoons, the measuring spoons, what have you, and make sure that's all put away before we ever are ready to come in and eat our meal. It just makes meal cleanup so much faster to not have a huge mess from all the meal prep time, and then you just have to put away your plates and whatever leftovers and whatever pans are left from the cooking. Another thing that may seem like kind of a small piece, but I really like it, it has saved some time for sure, is when you're peeling vegetables like carrots or cucumbers or whatever, potatoes, peel in a bowl. So instead of peeling in the sink, which is what I used to do you do that? Peel into a bowl or directly into the trash can. So if you peel in a bowl, you can just have everything peeled right there and just dump it. You can dump it in your compost or into your trash if you do that, or if you do it directly in your trash, even better. So that just saves one step in not having to then clean everything out of the sink, which I think personally it feels kind of gross. I don't like doing that anyways. So, and then you don't have to clean your sink so much afterwards. So that's just a really nice little time saver. Another thing I would suggest is only keeping your essential appliances. Now, whether you keep them on the counter or not is just, your preference. I don't like a lot of clutter, but there are some things that honestly, it is not worth putting away every time that you're not using them between meals, because if you're basically using them every day, why not leave them out where it's more efficient? Unless, you have company or you're taking pictures for Instagram or whatever, then obviously you might want to put them away. But if not, leave out your essentials and they're there ready to go. So for us, I like to have essentials that are multi-purpose. I've gotten rid of a lot of things that I don't really use. We don't even use a microwave, so we got rid of that. So the things that we typically use are a blender. We have a Vitamix. We have a little mini blender, which I really love that for just straight up cooking. I do a lot of sauces in that. My son likes to make individual smoothies. We use our big blender for bigger things like smoothies for the whole family. But it's nice to just have things that are multi-purpose that you can make a lot of things in versus one appliance for each thing. So I basically have a blender, we have a toaster because we eat a lot of bread in our family, the homemade bread. I have a hand mixer, and then I have a salad shooter, which I've had that for years. I've gone through several of them because I like them so much, but they're just really nice for grinding up things, shredding nuts. It's really easy to just, shoot it right into whatever you're cooking. And so that's been a really nice thing to have on hand. So basically what I'm saying is keep your essentials only, keep them out if you use them regularly versus having to put them away and get them out again over and over, and try to get things that are multi-purpose. Another thing I really enjoy, which maybe a little bit of a time saver, maybe not huge, but I like to have functional decor in my kitchen. So I have a kitchen shelf and I have hooks on a little bar under the kitchen shelf. So I like to keep things there that I actually use that are also really pretty to look at. So that way you can keep things out that look nice, and it's also really easy to grab and go. So I've got a pitcher on there, I've got a lemon juicer, and spoons and things like that are things that I use, but they still look really nice. Okay, now these next two tips are probably my favorite ones. So definitely stick around because you're not going to want to miss this. These are game changing. The first one is put things near where you use them. Now this may seem like a no-brainer, I've heard this before kind of thing, but hear me out. Have your measuring spoons on either side of the kitchen. So for example, my kitchen is set up in a way that on one side of the kitchen, I have a cutting board and I've got a drawer with my things that I would use at the cutting board. And I've got my knife block there because I do my bread cutting and I do, preparing the bread, putting on your we use coconut oil or your nut butters or your jams or whatever. So we have those things that we use at the cutting board near the cutting board. We also have the toaster right there because that way when we're cutting the bread, you can just put it right in the toaster. I also have my mixing bowls on that side because I tend to use my mixing bowls to use for baking or what have you. I usually do all that right on top, just set the bowl on the cutting board. So I've got my spoons I use for that kind of cooking on that side. On the other side of the kitchen, I have my stove. On that side, I have the spoons I like to use on the stove, which are different than the ones I use on the other side. So I don't have to keep going back and forth oh, where's that spoon? Oh, where's that knife? I also keep right in front of the kitchen sink my vegetable peeler and a paring knife because I use those at the sink only. I don't use those at the cutting board. I don't use those at the stove, although the stove is right next to there, so that works anyways. But you definitely want to use the things, put the things next to where you're going to be using them. That may mean you have a set of measuring spoons over here and a set of measuring spoons over here. Measuring cup here, measuring cup here. Put them where you're going to use them and it's just so much faster, and it's worth it to have them right there, right where you're going to need them. All right, this is the number one tip I don't think I've heard anyone else share, and that is use one measuring spoon only. And that one measuring spoon is a tablespoon. Here's why. A tablespoon is 3 teaspoons. So you know, if you've got a measuring spoon that's a tablespoon and you have a recipe that calls for like 1 teaspoon, you're just gonna roughly use 1/3 of that tablespoon. It's so much faster than having to use, whatever spoon. Oh, where's my half teaspoon? Where's my teaspoon? I just hold my tablespoon and it's like, all right, I need a teaspoon of that. I need a tablespoon of that. I need a half teaspoon of that. And okay, granted, if you're using a new recipe and you want to be super exact, then you might want to use all the measuring spoons. I haven't used more than a tablespoon for a very long time because it is so much faster. You will just find that you really don't need to be that exact most of the time, and you end up probably, if you're like me, salting it to taste anyways. So, I have figured out that when I cook a pot of beans, it's always 1 tablespoon of salt. So that's just a given. That's just what I know from, our experience and the taste we like. So just like with my last tip, I said, keep the stuff near where you use it. I have a tablespoon on one side of the kitchen and the other side of the kitchen, next to the stove and next to the cutting board where I do all my mixing and cooking of things. So those are pretty much my favorite kitchen efficiency tips. Let me know if you have any other tips that have saved you a lot of time in the kitchen in the comments below. And thanks for watching. Go ahead and watch one of these other videos that have a lot of helpful tips as well, and I'll see you next time.